All right, here we go. Today we have Hunter Biden, son of former President Joe Biden. Hunter has been in the center of major political and legal controversies involving his foreign business dealings, addiction struggles, and high-profile criminal cases. He's also been a constant target of Donald Trump and his political attacks. Hunter, welcome to VladTV.
Thanks for having me, man.
We're actually in South Africa right now.
Yeah, my wife is South African, so we're here spending some time with her family.
Very cool. Well, first time, let's start at the very beginning. So you were born in 1970.
Yes.
And you're born in Wilmington, Delaware, and the second son of Joe and Nelia Biden.
Yes. Yep.
Well, you're growing up in this family, and your dad is elected as a U.S. Senator when you were 2 years old.
Exactly.
But shortly afterwards was the biggest catastrophe of your life.
Yeah.
Talk about what happened.
In 1972, my dad was elected to the United States Senate. He was only 29 years old. And in between the time that he was elected and he was being sworn in, my mom, my brother, myself, and my younger sister were in a car, in a station wagon. We were Christmas tree shopping. My dad had gone down to D.C. to hire staff and check out his office, and a tractor trailer broadsided us and killed my sister, my mom, and trapped my brother and I in the car for a while. He was severely injured, and so was I. And we spent a lot of time in the hospital after that. And then we regrouped, and you know, my family surrounded me, my brother, the whole state of Delaware did in many ways. And the truth of the matter is that time of my life, I don't know if I have what are real memories or memories that have been kind of imprinted in my mind by virtue of all the stories that I've been told over and over again.
Well, the accident was horrific. Your mom and, like you said, your younger sister were killed in the car accident. Your sister was like 1 year old?
Yeah, just a little over 1 year old, about 14 months.
Wow. So your brother had a broken leg and other injuries. You actually had a skull fracture.
Yeah, I had a brain injury and skull fracture, and my brother was in traction for an extended period of time, and basically in a body cast for a long time. He was just about 4, and I was just about 3. My brother and I are a year and a day apart.
You said you remember waking up in the hospital with your brother there next to you?
I do. I have a distinct memory of that. But again, I've learned since that that I think only about some very, very small percentage of people actually have any real memories before the age of 5 or 7. But a small percentage, I think 12-15% of people do have those memories. What I know is that whether they're actual memories or whether the stories that have been told over and over again, they feel like memories to me.
Okay, so you guys get through this horrific accident. And in 1977, when you were 7 years old, Joe Biden remarries Jill.
Yep.
Do you remember how it felt to have Jill as a stepmom during that time?
Yeah. Well, in between that time, what happened was that my aunt moved into our house. My uncle converted the garage into an apartment. We spent Almost. I saw my grandparents on my dad's side almost every day. And, you know, our whole family surrounded us. I mean, the truth of the matter is that while it was the most traumatic experience of my life, there was an enormous outpouring of love. And then my mom, my mom, came into our lives and was just a continuation of that. But when I became attached to her almost immediately, and I've never considered her my quote unquote stepmom. And I know people say that almost out of respect by virtue of the way those relationships work. But she's been my mom since we got married, and I say we got married because my brother and I we bullied her into it a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Well, as you're getting older, when you're getting to 12, 13, preteen age, did you talk to your dad about the accident and losing your mom and your sister and so forth, and how he felt and what he went through?
Yeah, and it was always a open topic for conversation. The conversation isn't the right word. We constantly, and still to this day, talk about my mom and my sister. And they're not only honored and treasured by their memory, but they're a living part of every experience that we have, including with my mom now. And so it's every part of their memory is been, you know, a deep part of our life.
Okay, so as you get into high school, you start experimenting with drinking. You said you actually fell in love with alcohol during this time.
Yeah, I don't know if I fell in love with as much as I, you know, one of the things that I think that people that aren't addicts or alcoholics, I don't really find a distinction between the two things, the two labels, is that alcohol was an answer. It answered the question of, will I always feel this way? Will I always have this social anxiety? Will I always feel alone in a crowd? Will I always feel like I am too nervous or scared to get up and ask the girl to dance? And those are some of the trivial things that hole or that sense of lacking that alcohol and you know, whatever the drug of choice may be, you know, fills. It works, and it works until it stops working.
Okay, during this time in high school, was it just alcohol, or did you smoke weed, do other drugs?
No, the one drug I could never do. I mean, I literally have done every drug that you can possibly imagine. I don't think there's a drug that you can mention that I haven't done. But the truth of the matter is that weed always put me into a comatose state. So I kept trying. I tried over and over again, but I couldn't. But no, it was mainly alcohol. I experimented with cocaine, I think, when I was, you know, about 18 years old, and I dabbled in that a little bit, but it was mainly alcohol.
Okay, so you graduate high school. Were you like a straight A student, or were you kind of in the middle?
No, I did well. I did well. I did well enough to, I got into Georgetown. I played football, was serious about that. And I did well on my SATs. And actually, you know what? I got the same exact score on my SATs as you did, I think. I watched your interview with a 1290. Yeah, so.
We both got a 1290 on our SATs.
Yeah, we both got a 1290.
I'm as smart as Hunter Biden. Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a score like that will pretty much get you into most high-end universities, along with good grades. So now you're going to Georgetown. And look, I went to UC Berkeley, and I know first time on your own, you got the frats, you got everyone that's not living with their parents anymore, the drinking, the partying gets crazy freshman, sophomore year. Were you part of that?
Oh yeah, yeah. We didn't have frats at Georgetown, but it was Georgetown is a big drinking school at that time, and so just a lot of drinking, and you're exactly right. It's that you kind of let loose your freshman year, and but still it was it was contained. It did not become a problem for me in college.
Okay, so you graduated college, and then you had your first child, your daughter, Naomi.
Well, after college, I did a thing called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And the Jesuit Volunteer Corps is like the best way to describe it is like a domestic Peace Corps. And you live with other volunteers, and you make $80 a month, and you pool all your money and to buy groceries. And I lived with 7 other volunteers in a house in Northeast Portland. I ran a emergency service shelter, emergency services community center in the basement of a church, which was just me, literally in the basement of the church, and people in the community that couldn't get their lights or their utilities back on in the middle of winter, or the families that didn't have enough food that week, and I would advocate for them. And I did that. I met my first wife, and shortly after we had Naomi, and I started law school.
Right. So you're 23 years old, you have a child and a wife, and you go to Yale Law School.
Yeah, well, I started with, I didn't get into Yale at first try. And so I started at Georgetown, and in that first year I had Naomi, and I did really well. And I applied to transfer, and I got into Yale as a transfer student for the final 2 years. So I graduated from Yale Law in 96.
Okay, so 1996, you're 26 years old, you have a Yale Law degree, so you can pretty much do whatever you want.
Yep.
And your dad is a senator.
Yep.
So that puts even more prestige on your entering the workforce. Now, you joined MBNA, which is a major credit card company.
Yeah.
Now, MBNA was also a major donor to your dad's Senate campaigns.
Yep.
So did that play a role in you getting a job there?
No. MBNA was the largest employer in the state of Delaware. I could have gone to work for anyone. I could have gone to work at Goldman Sachs. I could have gone to work at any law firm in the country. I had offers from at least 5 different major law firms. And at that time, in 1996, a lot of my classmates at Yale were going into banking, and they were not going in directly into the law, or they were going into consulting, into McKinsey or other consulting firms. And I had worked at Skadden Arps, and I'd worked at Jenner and Block, and I'd worked at a smaller firm out of Chicago over the summers that I was between law school years. And I had determined that I would rather be the banker being represented by the lawyer than the lawyer being than representing the banker. And so I went and I went to a number of the large institutional and investment banks in New York. And the decision that I made was that I couldn't see how, with a child, I could live in Manhattan. And in doing that, I met with somebody from MBNA, and they said, you should come down here, and there's a great executive training program at MBNA. And so I went, and I decided that I'd much rather live at home next to with my entire extended family, including my brother and my sister and my parents, and having them around and support for, having a at that time, 3-year-old. And so I moved back to MBNA, went to work for them for about, 18 months, a little bit longer than that, and decided that I just couldn't do it. It was a great company. They were incredibly good to their employees, but it was a corporate lifestyle that I wasn't built for, and so I left and I went down to Washington, and I took a job with Bill Daley at the Department of Commerce and as the executive director of e-commerce policy at that time. Worked there for 2 years, and then came out and started my own law firm.
Right. So you worked at the U.S. Department of Commerce in the Clinton administration.
Yep.
And you focused on e-commerce policy. This was 1998. So e-commerce was still relatively new. Not everyone trusted their credit cards on the internet and so forth. Like, what type of policies did you create during that time?
Well, it was all about privacy then. It was all about whether or not almost the entire discussion was around the privacy and what it would mean. And again, it was called e-commerce at the time, and so it was the very nascent stages of and there was a program that the Department of Commerce was responsible for that came out of the White House called Bridging the Digital Divide. And it was trying to bring the internet to rural and urban areas that did not have access. And this way back in, 1999, working into 2000.
Now, were you talking to Clinton at all during this time, directly?
Oh, no. I was all hat, no cattle. I think I had one of the longest titles in government. My official title was Executive Director of E-commerce Policy Coordination for the Department of Commerce. And the truth of the matter was, as the Chief of Staff at the Department of Commerce told me, he said, "We can call you executive director because there isn't really such a title in government. You're either a director," and but he was a great guy. But it was great. It was an incredible experience. I traveled around the world with the Secretary of Commerce, who was Bill Daley. He was an amazing man in his own right, and as a mentor, he was an incredible person to be around. But I was a 28-year-old, 29-year-old, basically junior appointee.
Okay. And during this time, you had more kids. You had 2 more children.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Finnegan was born in 1998, and Maisie was born in 2000.
You ended up leaving the U.S. Department of Commerce position to start your own firm.
Well, actually, I was a political appointee under the Clinton administration, and the Bush administration came in. So it was not so there wasn't any rollover from Clinton to Bush, and so I went out and I had probably more experience than 90% of the people in the legal profession as it related to privacy policies in e-commerce. And so I went and I don't even remember the names of some of the companies that I did privacy policy legal work on behalf of. And I remember, if you remember at that time, how old were you at that time?
Well, I am 3 years younger than you.
Okay, so you do remember is that everybody and their brother had going to be a millionaire on paper by virtue of the e-commerce company, the online internet business that they had started. And there was a lot of work out there, legal work as related to it. And so I started a law firm, and I joined a a lawyer named Bill Oldacre. So it was Oldacre and Biden for a period of time. Bill was in his, 35 years or maybe 35 or 40 years my senior at that time. But I started that law firm and had a number of clients in the privacy space as related to the legal work I did. And then the bottom dropped out of the e-commerce bubble hit, and the internet bubble of, what was it, 2002, 2000, around that time, and I had to shift my my business model. And at that time, I had reestablished contact with a good friend of mine who was the president of St. Joe's University. He was a Jesuit. I knew him from the period of time in which I was a part of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And they had a project in St. Joe's in Philadelphia, which is in Overbrook, which is neighboring one of the tougher areas of Philadelphia. And they had a project where they sent their graduate students into the public high schools as support, and they needed funding, and they got that funding from a pool of money that is established in the Department of Education. And he asked me if I could help him, and so I did help him in that for St. Joe's, and then from St. Joe's I then represented. I think the next university was Detroit Mercy. Detroit Mercy had a dental school. It was the only university that still exists inside the city limits of Detroit. And it's the oldest institution in the city of Detroit. And at that time in Detroit, there literally was not a single dentist office within the city limits. They'd all moved out. They'd all fled to the suburbs. But Detroit Mercy had a dental school, so we helped them get money for a mobile dental clinic. That's the kind of work I did. I ended up representing between, I think 12 and 17 Jesuit universities. That was the lobbying work I think you're referring to.
Okay. And you actually had to register as a federal lobbyist when you were doing that, right?
I did, yeah.
Got it. And you had a bunch of clients. Not only universities, but biotech companies, financial firms, and one of your clients ended up being, no?
No, what financial firm?
Okay, no financial firms. Okay, my bad. Well, hold on. Wasn't MBNA a client of yours around this time?
No. I represented MBNA as it related to privacy for legal work, but only for a year when I was doing the legal work I was telling you about.
You were allegedly a consultant for MBNA with a $100K retainer at one point, right?
I did privacy work for MBNA in that early period of time when I started my law firm. Yeah, I don't remember the exact dates, but yeah.
Right, and this kind of became a thing later on because Joe Biden actually supported bankruptcy legislation, which favored companies like MBNA. So people try to tie those things together on you.
Vlad, where are you getting your reporting from here? No, I'm really serious because I don't think you got the full picture. But we can keep going. Yeah, and so my dad my dad was supported the bankruptcy bill for MBNA. Yep.
Okay. So this is how people try to tie these things together. So is there any truth in that from your point of view?
Is there any truth to what?
To MBNA hiring you as a consultant because of some of the way that, the ways that your dad was voting and so forth?
No, I think it's a fair question. I think that, it's, I think that without understanding the state of Delaware, it's 100% a fair question. MBNA was the largest employer in the state of Delaware. It had an outsized impact on not just the the influence that it had, but in terms of employment, in terms of the trajectory of the state. When MBNA formed in Delaware, what it did, it ended up attracting the entire banking industry around the credit card business into the state of Delaware. There are a few other states that have grown that business, like I think South Dakota at one point and Nevada. But MBNA was a major employer in the state of Delaware.
Okay, so by 2003, you're 33 years old.
Yep.
Your alcohol use had increased, and you went to rehab for the first time around this time?
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of people drink, people do drugs, people smoke, and so forth, but rehab is a major step that not everyone takes. So what was the final step that said, I need to go to rehab?
My brother came to me and he said, how's this serving you? There was nothing that was out of control in a way that was, dangerous or anything, except that it was clear that, I wasn't present. I wasn't present in his life the way that he would want me to be present. I wasn't present in my family's life the way that they would want me to be. Mainly started off because I started to make promises to myself that a lot of people that have addiction, and by the way, you say not a lot of people do this. 50 million Americans suffer from addiction every year, today, right now. I don't know of anybody that doesn't know somebody that that hasn't had that loves or is close to somebody that has had a problem with addiction. I don't know anybody. I've never met a single person. And so that was my brother, and he was right. So I used to make promises to myself like a lot of addicts or alcoholics do. And it was, I'll only drink on weekends. I'll only, I won't drink for the month of January. I'll give up booze for Lent. And invariably each time I'd fail. And once it became clear that I've made these promises to myself, I'd start making them to other people. And then I wouldn't keep those promises to the other people that love me and that I love. And then I'd start to hide it. So then I'd start to drink under the table, basically. And there's an enormous amount of shame just in that lying, and creates a whole separate life from the people that you love. And so I agreed to go to, he suggested I needed help. We looked for a rehab, we found one, and I went.
At this time, was it just drinking, or was there drug use as well?
No, it was just drinking.
Just drinking. Okay, so you come out of rehab, 2003, and at that point, is the drinking totally done, or are you still dabbling here and there?
No, I'm done. I'm done. I come back from rehab, I go to my first meeting, I get a sponsor, and I am sober for just about 7 years before I relapsed.
Okay, so things are going well for you, and by 2008, you're 38 years old. Obama announces your father, Joe Biden, as his VP running mate for president. How long did you know that Obama picked your dad as his running mate before it was actually announced?
I don't remember, but it couldn't have been more than, a few hours.
Oh, okay. So
well,
here you have...
because what happens is that they ask, and then they almost don't immediately announce because they know that it's going to leak. So they hold off usually telling their choice until they're ready to actually announce it.
Right, and obviously the answer was yes. So now your dad is running for vice president with Barack Obama, the first serious black candidate in presidential history. Now, of course, there's been, other candidates during that time, like Jesse Jackson and so forth, but none of them really had a real shot at it. But Obama looked like he really had a shot at it. When you heard about this, how'd you feel?
I thought it was the most amazing, thing in the world. I didn't know whether or not my dad would be comfortable being a vice president, but I was absolutely certain that the opportunity to serve as the vice president to not just Barack Obama because he was going to be the first black president, but because Barack Obama. I mean, he was a once in a lifetime generational inspiration to all of us. I remember seeing then Senator Obama give the keynote address at the 2004 convention in Boston. And I turned to my dad then and I said, he could be president one day. And not only was my brother, myself, I mean, it was, I think, one of the most incredible honors that any one of us could have imagined for my dad to be chosen by Barack Obama to be his partner in that.
Well, at the time that your dad started running for vice president, did you have to shut down your lobbying company?
What did I shut down? Yes. What I did was I shut down my lobbying firm altogether, and not because I had to. No one asked me to do that. But what had happened is that John McCain's pet issue in 2008 and before was this thing called earmarking. And earmarking took many forms. Earmarking is when a congressperson decides that they want to support a constituent in their district. And so they go to one of the 14 appropriations bills and they earmark a certain a subset of funds to go for a specific project in their district. And technically, when I represented the Jesuit universities, that's what that was. And so McCain had made a kind of that was his like passion project, and so I gave up my lobbying business altogether and kind of had to reinvent myself again.
Okay, so this election happens and Obama kills it, becomes the next president, and your dad is officially the vice president. Now, in a lot of cases, the vice president ends up becoming the president after the second term of the incumbent president. So now you have a dad who's vice president, potentially the next president in 8 years.
Yeah.
How did that feel at that moment?
I don't know if we really thought about it that way at that moment. And I mean, I did thinking 8 years ahead, and I don't know whether that's a personal thing with my family. You know, at least in our experience, 6 months is a long time to plan ahead, let alone 8 years. And obviously a lot could happen in between that time. But yeah, I didn't, I don't remember, if you remember that time, I don't know what your politics are. So all I can say is this, is that when Barack Obama got elected, it was an affirmation of my belief of what the United States of America could be. I mean, and it's unfair to put all on President Obama, all of that kind of responsibility, because it wasn't literally just all about him. But in many respects, it was kind of the answer to all of the injustice that it didn't make up for it, but all of the injustice of the 230 38 years that came before. Not just as it relates to race, but so many other things. And so I don't know if any of us were really, at least I wasn't, kind of thinking beyond just what an extraordinary moment in time it was.
What changed in your life when your dad is now the vice president of the United States?
It changed my life, you say?
Like, what changes? Like, at that point, like, do you have Secret Service protecting you and so forth, or is that just for the actual president, vice president?
It goes down to that, to us, and as vice presidents, children, and one of the things about Secret Service is, I love the guys and the women that are in the Secret Service, but it's kind of cool for about a week, and then it gets really old really fast. I mean, having to get into a car with somebody everywhere you go, having somebody follow you to the bathroom, having somebody sitting outside your door everywhere you are is, it takes some getting used to, and so it's not as kind of cool as you think it would be. But yeah, it absolutely there's a you're in a kind of in a different world. It's not the presidency, but it is. But a lot more eyes you find are trained on you.
Okay, well, in 2012, Obama runs again against Mitt Romney, blows him out the water again, and now he's doing his second term with your dad, Joe Biden, once again as the vice president. Now, during this time, did you form a relationship with Obama?
Relationship, yes. I mean, I had a relationship to the degree that his daughters and my daughters were the same age and went to school together and were best friends. And so Maisie played basketball and was in the same class as Sasha, and they were best friends and really close. And Malia was a year older than Finnegan, and they were close friends and still are to this day. And so in that respect, but the truth of the matter is that the presidents, don't really have many friends in the sense of just the amount of time, if you're doing it the way that it should be done, that you have to spend on the relationships that matter to you, let alone build new relationships, is about zero. And so, but that being said, I love President Obama, and but I knew him more as he was the girls' basketball coach every Sunday for a while there. He really was, and Maisie was the star of the team, which he would tell you was probably some of the most fun. Is we would these little kind of like CYO leagues, and so it would be my dad, President Obama, and Maisie and Sasha, and in a grade school gymnasium about the size of a large office, and every single parent and uncle from the opposing team. I mean, these places would be filled with people to watch it, which put a lot of pressure on Maisie because she was the go-to 8-year-old for junior basketball.
Okay, so in 2013, a year after Obama was reelected to a second term, you joined the Navy Reserve's Direct Commission Officer Program.
Yep.
And you were 43 years old at the time. So because of your age, you needed an age waiver, and you had to essentially take a drug test? Number one, why exactly did you join this program at age 43?
Well, I started the process when I was about 41. I was going to join the Delaware National Guard, where my brother had joined. My brother, as you know, by that time had already served in the Delaware National Guard and had been to Iraq and had come back after a year being deployed in Baghdad, and I decided that I wanted to serve, and I started off the process there, but couldn't get the age waiver, and so I went and I had a friend who was in the Navy Reserve as an intelligence officer, and he suggested I try to apply through the Navy. They had a more liberal age waiver program, and I started off as on the intelligence reserve officer side, and they shifted me into the public affairs, and I got commissioned to serve and reported to Norfolk, and failed a drug test.
Right, you tested positive for cocaine.
Yep.
How long had you been using cocaine at that point?
At that point, I hadn't been using cocaine even remotely on a regular basis. I would not have been stupid enough to knowing that I was going to get a drug test to have used. I think that I was so fucked up that I used cocaine almost unwittingly, but I was like a garbage can, you know. I mean, if you, I had relapsed. I was drinking heavily, and obviously I had used. I went down to Norfolk. I took a drug test, and failed.
Yeah, you made a statement. You said, "It was an honor of my life to serve the U.S. Navy, and I deeply regret and embarrassed that my actions led to my administrative discharge."
Yep.
Later on, Trump would say you were dishonorably discharged, but that's not actually true.
No, it isn't.
Okay. How'd you feel when later on he kept, pushing that slightly different narrative?
Well, I mean, look, man, I don't know how to. I mean, I feel a lot of ways about Donald Trump. I don't really spend too much time. I mean, he said so many things about me that I didn't even remember that that was one of them, But I'm always amazed by the audacity coming from a guy who not only does not serve, but obviously lied to get out of service himself, and lied, I think, over 5 times about having bone spurs. And so, I may have fucked up. I may have failed a drug test, but the fact of the matter is, at the same time, is that I was trying to, I think, do something that was honorable, and I really fucked it up. And I wanted to serve, and I embarrassed. And when I say I'm embarrassed, I wasn't worried about embarrassing my family or embarrassing myself. I felt like I embarrassed the Navy, and more than anything, the incredible people that did report to duty that day, that didn't fuck up like me and fail a drug test. I mean, it was awful going back and having to tell my commanding officer, what was going on. I mean, I can feel it still in my chest today, and having to take that uniform and basically hand it back in.
How did your dad take it? Because he's a vice president at this point. Going through that just as a normal human being is one thing, but when your father is the vice president of the United States, especially with the type of microscope Obama was on, how did your dad take it in that first conversation go?
He was upset. You know, I mean, one of the things I talk about in terms of unconditional love doesn't mean that you don't get pissed off. Unconditional love doesn't mean that you're not angry. Unconditional love doesn't mean you go, oh, it's okay, honey, come here, I'll fix it for you. Like, let me give you an example of the difference between my family and the Trump family. Do you think that there's a chance in fucking hell that if Don Jr., which just, you know, divorce yourself from reality, that he would ever choose to serve, okay? But if he ever chose to fucking serve, be a part of something larger than than self-enrichment, you think he'd ever, if he failed a drug test in this administration, that there would be any reporting agency within the Pete Hegseth's Department of Defense that would report him? Do you think there would be anyone? Do you think his father would allow him to be administratively discharged? Ever, if that was the case. And that's my point. I fucked up, not my dad. My dad didn't fuck up. I fucked up. I'm a drug addict. I'll always be a drug addict. I'm in recovery now, and I'm really fucking proud of it. But the one thing I do know is that my dad didn't fuck up. What my dad did was said, what the fuck? And I said, Dad. And I got back on track, and he helped me get back on track. And then shortly after that, my brother was diagnosed, and you know, kind of, you know, it all spun from there.
Well, okay, leading up to this incident, you said that you had relapsed.
Yeah.
Right? So, and this happened in 2013. So what caused you to relapse, and what year did the relapse happen?
Oh man, I think one of the things that I don't know what your, and I don't mean this in a you know, I'm not saying it pejoratively, is that I don't know what your experience with addiction is with people that have been in recovery. And you know, almost everybody that has almost everybody that I ever known that has had addiction, unfortunately, you know, relapse is a part of their story. I hope it's never a part of my story ever again. But what happened is, you know, I went through in 2010, I was on a plane, and I was on a plane back from a business trip in Europe. And I got upgraded into business class. And I was literally the only person sitting in business class. The entire rest of the business class was empty for some reason. And a drink cart rolled by. And I was alone. I literally did kind of like this, kind of looked around me. Nobody was there. And I remembered a story somebody told me when I went to my first rehab in 2003. And they told a story about how they'd been sober for a period of time. And they were on a plane by themselves. And they took a drink. And they were flying from LA to LA to New York. And a week later, they woke up in Indiana. And I remember specifically that that's the story that kind of flashed through my head. And you'd think there would be a cautionary tale, but for some reason, what it did was say, I'll have a Bloody Mary. And, you know, and so after that, I went through a cycle over that 3-year period of time of sobriety and relapse and sobriety and a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, lying to people about not drinking when I was really drinking, sneaking a bottle into the garage, that kind of thing. I mean, straight out of a movie.
Okay, so that happened in 2013 in terms of the Navy. In 2014, you joined the board of Burisma Holdings, which is a major Ukrainian natural gas company. And your father was vice president, and your father as vice president was overseeing U.S. policy in Ukraine. You were paid around $50,000 per month. This arrangement became very controversial.
Yep.
So leading up to the situation, you were mostly focused on foreign dealings?
No, at that time I had shifted my business to advisory business. I was working on behalf of a lot of infrastructure work in the United States domestically, and I was also of counsel to a large global law firm called Boyce Schiller and Flexner, and I specifically focused on corporate governance, because I had also at that time had been the vice chairman of the board of Amtrak, the National Passenger Rail System here in the United States, largest rail system in the world. And I was the chairman of the corporate governance committee for that organization for over 6 years. I was the chairman of the board of the UN World Food Program, which was responsible for attaining the $2.6 billion in funding for the UN World Food Program, which is the largest humanitarian organization in the world. Serves over 70 million people in 80 different countries on a daily basis, and does all of the airlift and telecommunications for the entire UN. And I was also on the board of at least 9 other major organizations. I was also a professor at the Georgetown University's master's program in the School of Foreign Service for 4 years. I taught a class called The Art of Advocacy, and it's specifically around things like PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief in Africa. And I had a host of other experience, particularly on boards. And so when I was asked to serve on the board, I said no at first, and I took them on as a client in the law firm of Boyce Schiller Flexner, and I did not represent them. A person that in Boyce Schiller, and then President Kwasniewski, who is the former president of Poland, who served on the board of Burisma, picked up the phone after representing them for about 3 months and said, I'd really like you to come on the board. And I agreed. I agreed to go on the board, and I sent out a press release the day that I accepted the offer to go on the board.
Going into this, did you think this was going to be a problem later on?
No, and therein lies the problem, Vlad. You know, look, I don't know if you have any family that's still in Ukraine, and so I don't mean this as this isn't an attack, but I was not. I was naive. I was incredibly naive to just how much of a political viper's nest Ukraine was, and also how incredibly complicated in terms of the interests that I wasn't even fully aware of. The real truth is that at that period of time, Beau had been diagnosed, and I was starting to spin out in terms of I hadn't relapsed again, but more than anything, I just thought, like, my dad's not running for president. Clearly, when you're diagnosed with glioblastoma stage 4, the chances of survival are about 0.2% past 2 years, and so it just became a I don't know. I did know this. I knew that I was qualified to do what they were asking me to do, and I knew that there was a significant amount of money in doing it, in which I would be able to spend a lot of time focusing on family, which I fucked up too.
Well, yeah, you're getting paid $600,000 a year to be on this board.
Yeah, well, which, by the way, it, just as you know, is that in terms of a Fortune 500 company, if you're serving on a board with stock options, and it's not out of whack. It's a fucking lot of money, though, a whole lot of money, and it was a whole lot of money to me. It was life changing in terms of what I could do, and what I didn't have to do, and that's 100%. I went on the board fully understanding that part of it, and certainly didn't take into account how much they would be able to weaponize this in the future. And but the fact of the matter too is that at that time, Hillary Clinton was the quote unquote kind of de facto nominee for the Democratic Party, which meant that my dad would be out of politics in 18 months, and when there was no path back in after that.
Did you and your dad have a conversation about you taking this role, and in terms of how his position would be viewed with you taking this role?
No, I took the role, and it was announced in the press, and that's how he found out about it. And he picked up the phone. I mean, one of the things that I think people find hard to believe, because of the day and age that we live in which Donald Trump just reported, $1.4 billion in cryptocurrency income alone in the first year of his presidency, and in which Don Jr. just got $678 million loan guarantee from the Department of Defense, the largest loan guarantee ever given. And that doesn't include the $787 million in contracts that he got for his underlying private equity companies, or the $6 billion that Jared Kushner has in a private equity firm, all from Gulf states, as he negotiates a war as an unofficial representative of the United States. So let's forget all of that. And let's come back to Hunter, because this must be really important to you, Vlad. This must be right, like the thing that we got to get to the bottom of. And the thing that we got to get to the bottom of is, did Hunter Biden know that he fucked up when he took the Burisma job? Yeah, Vlad, I knew. I figured it out, and I figured it out quick. And the way that I figured it out is I picked up the phone when Dad called me, and he said, "I hope you know what you're doing." And I said, "I do, Dad." And I knew he didn't think that I did, and I didn't. And there it is, man. I mean, look, I should not have taken the job at Burisma, not because my dad did anything for me as it related to Burisma, not because anybody in the government did anything. And by the way, they had 7 years to investigate this, with every single investigative body in the history of the United States of America, and not one single person. Even more than that, Vlad, I'll give you this. You have 22 years of my digital footprint. Every email that I've ever written, every text message that I've ever sent, every single voicemail that has ever been stored in my iCloud, every single communication over the course of 22 years, every one, and not a single email in which I asked my dad to do me a favor on behalf of a client, including Burisma. Not a single one. Now, you would think that that would be dispositive. And by the way, I would also think this too: in an age of corruption, at the level of Caligula, okay, in the Roman Empire, compared to now, which, by the way, as a total dollar figure, Trump has beaten Caligula by a long shot, okay. And by the way, he loves being compared to dictators, so he won't mind that comparison at all. All right. The fact of the matter is that I 100% completely, fully know that I should not have taken that job in retrospect. In retrospect, because of the political position that I put my dad in. Because of the political position that I put my dad in when he went to fire the prosecutor, Shokin. Shokin was a corrupt motherfucker who was protecting Burisma. Shokin was the reason that the Ambassador Pyatt of Ukraine wanted him fired. And every single organization in the world, whether it was the European Union, the UK, the US, the Department of Justice, every single major anti-corruption organization in the world was demanding, including the IMF, in order to be able to get the $1.2 billion loan guarantee, that the Ukrainians fire Shokin because he was corrupt. My dad delivered that message in Ukraine. Now, the ignoramus argument is that somehow by firing Shokin, my dad was protecting me, when the exact opposite was true. The exact opposite was true. Shokin was protecting Burisma. Shokin was not allowing for these oligarchs who owned these companies, who were buying influence inside of Ukraine, from getting prosecuted, and he was getting paid for it in diamonds and gold. And you know that, if you know anything about Ukraine, you know that to be true. So instead, however, I have to have this argument over and over and over again to explain to people, you have no fucking clue what you're talking about. Now, should I have taken the job? No. Did my dad do anything wrong? Absolutely not. Not even remotely. Ask anybody in Ukraine. Ask anybody except Shokin or Telezenko or Derkach or Dmitry Firtash, who have all been convicted in absentia for treason inside of Ukraine for being GRU agents. But if you ask anybody that is on the side of democracy, what they will tell you is that Hunter Biden should have never taken that job. Did they do anything that was in any way illegal, or in any way a abuse of their power? My dad do? No, not once, not a single time.
Well, around this time, and you had touched on this already, your brother Beau had been diagnosed with brain cancer.
Around this time. And you have, I'll tell you what, you don't have very good transition, Vlad. You just go right at it. Okay, around this time, yeah, my brother's diagnosed. Okay, yep.
Right. So you guys are dealing with your brother having brain cancer. Mm-hmm. And then in 2015, he passed away. And you said that was the moment that you spiraled. And you said that after he died, you said, I didn't care if I lived or died.
Yeah.
And that was around the time that you actually tried crack for the first time.
So a year later, initially what happened is that I got separated from my wife within a month after my brother died. I moved out of the house by agreement between the two of us. I went into kind of a precautionary rehab because everybody was scared to death what I was going to do. I stayed in rehab in Pennsylvania for about 45 days. I got out of the rehab. I got this thing that they call like a sober coach, which is somebody that checks in with you on a daily basis. You know, they give you a breathalyzer every day. I did that for about 6 months. Then I joined an outpatient rehab. And I got kicked out of the outpatient rehab because I relapsed. And they wanted to drug test me. And I told them that I had used cocaine and that they didn't need to drug test me because I'm telling them. And I didn't want it to be a part of a record because, amazingly, rehabs, whether outpatient or inpatient, they're not protected by HIPAA. And so all of that could be discoverable in anything. And so I, like a child, like a petulant, addict, I said, okay, well, screw you. And I walked about a block and a half to a park that I knew around the corner, Lincoln Park, to find somebody that I knew was a user and had sold crack. And I bought that basically with the conscious to subconscious intent of killing myself.
Well, you had done cocaine for years leading up to this point. What was different about crack than actually powder cocaine?
Everything. I don't want to, make a commercial for for crack, but everything. It's uh, it's a much more direct and euphoric experience.
Well, you said at your low points, you're actually on your hands and knees, trying to pick through rugs, trying to find something that resembled crack. A lot of times it was Parmesan cheese or lint and so forth.
Yeah. One of the things that traps you in your addiction is this cycle you go through, in which you do things that are so degrading, so dehumanizing, that you just have this enormous amount of shame over it. Crawling around on a motel carpet floor for hours until your fingernails get bloody, digging through the carpet to look just for that one little piece of crack to smoke. That's the reason I tell that story. Not because it's funny to me. It may be funny to you, may be funny to the people that talk about it, and I understand that. But to an addict like me, what it is that memory of why I don't use anymore. Because you're so crazed that you're literally, fingers are bloody, you're picking up anything that resembles, possibly could be the drug, because you need it that bad. And that's just one example of the degradation that you go through if you're an addict like I was.
Look, I know someone whose mom basically sold her for some crack to addicts when she was, I think, in her early teens, something like that. I've heard just horror stories when it comes to crack addiction. Outside of the digging to find the crack, what do you think was the worst experience that you went through during this era?
Just more than anything, the complete loss of self, of any sense of connection. Being completely separated from the capacity to feel love or be loved. It was palpable, and you know it, and you see it there, and you know that it's out there, and you know that you're incapable of receiving any connection whatsoever that's real, that's genuine. And so you run from it like the plague, and it's awful. And there's so many moments during that period of time in my life that I put myself in an incredible amount of danger. I put other people in danger. I had guns drawn on me. I had I nearly drowned in a pool. Was saved by the grace of God by a stranger. It was awful, and the list just goes on and on.
So what exactly was the situation where you had guns drawn on you?
I had a gun drawn on me in Delaware. I had a gun drawn on me in Nashville. I had a gun drawn on me in Los Angeles. And each instance was in the attempt to purchase drugs. So in Delaware, in a transaction in a car, this one dealer that I had was got extremely pissed off at me, and he went to his car. He came back, and he put a gun in my face, and then in Los Angeles at about, I must have been 4 or 5 in the morning, down in the Flower District, and I would go down there to buy crack cocaine, and in basically the tent cities that they have down there, and I walked between what's called a cut, in between some of the tents, being led by a guy, and I came in half my body into a tent and had a gun drawn on me, and they took everything from me then. And anyway, number of times like that.
Okay, so we're getting into 2016, and everyone wants your dad to run for president against Donald Trump. But ultimately, he declined.
No, yeah, you're kind of mixing up. I wish everybody wanted him to run in 2016. Is that everybody, the vast majority of the party had already decided on Hillary Clinton. I think that she basically almost ran unopposed in 2016 against Trump.
Really? Because I clearly remember, I mean, because I voted, for your dad ultimately, but I remember during that time, me and everyone around me was really, really hoping that Joe Biden would run and not Hillary Clinton. I did not think Hillary Clinton really had a chance, but
I love you for that.
It was ultimately announced.
No, that may be true. I think at least inside my family, my brother had just died in 2015, but it broke something in all of us, and the truth of the matter is that I could not imagine my dad running at that time, and if that was your recollection, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that he had a better chance of winning at that time, and just like he proved in 2020 that he could beat Trump. But at the time, that was definitely not where my head was, or I think anybody in my family's head.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think in that election, if it was Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, and Trump had everything going against him, the whole grab by the pussy came out right before the election and so forth, I think your dad would have won it, personally.
That maybe, and yeah, but woulda, coulda, shoulda,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, 2016, Trump does win the election. Now, was it around this time that you and your brother's widow started a romantic relationship?
No, in 2016, no. 2016, 2017. By 2017, yes. I separated from my wife in July of 2015, and I got divorced from my wife in March of 2017. In between that time, I had a relationship with Hallie, in which it was stupid. It was one of the most, misguided attempts at, trying to figure out a way to bring my brother back. I don't even know. I mean, it was a really, really, really awful, misguided thing. It did more to hurt the people around me, particularly, my daughters, my niece and nephew, Hallie herself. I mean, it was really, grief does really fucked up things, but it doesn't matter. I mean, as I always say, all of these things are never an excuse, but it's at least an explanation. Whether you accept it or not, it isn't up to me. But it was a really fucked up thing, and at a really fucked up time in both our lives.
Well, when you guys got into a relationship, was she having drug issues as well?
She did, yes. But I don't want to talk about, that's not, for me, it's not my place, for real. Thank God She is in a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place. She's happily remarried and has, is in great, 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 great shape. And my fuck up was my fuck up, and not hers, and not hers in any single way.
Well, you guys are still in a relationship by 2018, and you end up purchasing a handgun while you're still struggling with addiction.
Yeah,
and when you purchased the gun,
just to be clear, we're not in a relationship by that time. The relationship lasted like a blip, and the only relationship that exists after that is that she's my sister-in-law, and she's trying to save me, like everybody else is trying to save me around me. And my car was parked at her house for a period of time. I came back to pick it up. There's a lockbox. It was a Ford F-150 with the center console, lockbox with this safe underneath of it. And in that safe was a handgun that I had purchased. And she had known the combination to the safe, and she was concerned about me. And she was, I believe, went in there to make sure that I was not using drugs. And she found the gun. She took the gun and she threw it in a trash can at a local grocery store. And when I went back to pick up my car and saw that the gun was missing from the center console lockbox, I obviously knew what had happened, and I said, where's the gun? And she said, I threw it away. And I said, you can't do that. I said, go back and get it. I said, you can do whatever you want with it, but go back and get it. And it was gone from the trash can she threw it in. And I said, you have to call the police. And so you have to tell them what happened. And she called the police and told them what happened. I returned to that grocery store, spoke to the police. We both explained what happened, and that was the end of the incident. And the day later, because of the videotape that they had, they found the person that had picked up the gun out of the trash can, who was a regular who went through and collected cans out of the trash can. And they took the gun, and I never took the gun back.
Well, why did you purchase the gun to begin with? Because when you purchased it, you have to fill out a form, and it says, are you a drug user or a drug addict? And you put no, and that caused a problem with you purchasing that gun later on, right?
Yeah, well, that's not exactly what it says, but 922G3 was just ruled unconstitutional, at least as it relates to marijuana users in this first round. And I believe that it will be ruled unconstitutional because it's incredibly vague. And basically what it says in that, under the old reading of 922G3, is that if you were or are currently a user of illegal narcotics, including marijuana, you are not allowed. You can't purchase a gun. You have to check the box that you are, which means that you can't purchase a gun. You don't pass that check. So that means that right now, just so we're clear, is that before the Supreme Court ruling that just came down, is it if you are a marijuana smoker and you own a gun, right now, you are in violation of the federal law of which I was convicted for. If you ever purchased a gun having ever used an illegal narcotic, okay, without checking that on the form, you are in violation of what I was convicted for. I was convicted for it. And I also know this, is that I'm the only person that I know of, it's the only case that we could find in which I was convicted for a violation of 922G3 as a standalone crime. My gun was not used in the commission of a crime. I did not have any priors. I did not load or fire the gun. I owned it for 11 days, and I then surrendered it to the police. In that period of time, they came back 5 years later, 2 days before the statutory limitations had expired, after turning down a plea deal in which I got what anybody would get, which was a diversion agreement saying that I would never own or attempt to own a firearm ever again. Ever again. And that's what I got convicted for.
Was there a reason why you bought the gun? I mean, you're fully allowed to have a gun in America. I'm a gun owner myself.
Yeah,
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it.
So isn't that funny though? Everybody asks me that. Republican, Second Amendment, people, why'd you buy the gun? Including my mom, by the way. What the fuck were you thinking? In a country in which there are 350 million handguns out there, it's like, well, the reason I bought a gun is probably the reason a lot of people buy a gun. Because I was sitting at an AT&T and I was waiting for my phone to get repaired. And across the street, there's a place called Star Shooters. And it's like part survival. And I always thought it to be. I'd passed it probably 1 million times in Delaware. And I was waiting around. I walked in and the guy sold me a gun. I started to look at the guns and he started to tell me about the different guns. And he said, this one's really cool. And I said, my brother and I used to always talk about going doing target practice. And he said, well, this is the one that you would start with. And so I went and I said, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to get it. Probably wasn't in a great state of mind to begin with, but I bought it like I would, go in and see like a really cool gadget at Best Buy and have a guy talk me into buying it. Now, I went to the counter to purchase it and I didn't have a driver's license. And I didn't have a registration of my car because I was driving my dad's car. It was his registration. So I had no ID. But you know what they did is they forged the form. And then when that ATF came to get the form from them, they forged it again. And then when the ATF caught them a month before the trial was about to begin, they lied again to the FBI about having forged the second form. And then when we wanted to bring that up in trial, the judge said no, because he didn't think that it was, didn't have anything to do with the case. So my point about all of it is, it was a comedy of fucking errors, okay? I didn't buy the gun for any other purpose than I walked in and I saw a shiny thing and there was a really great salesman and he said, hey, look at this. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And he puts it in my hand and I think, yeah, that's really cool. He said, but I don't have a driver's license. Do you need a driver's license? In the state of Delaware, you do. And not only do you need a driver's license, you need a Delaware driver's license, of which I did not have at the time. And so, anyway, long story short, they figured out how to get me the gun. And then when it came out in the news that it had leaked that this thing had happened 3 years earlier, or at that time when it came out was in 2020. So like 3 years later on a right-wing blog site, it turns out that the state trooper who had then left the force and the gun shop owner were really good friends. And they had heard the story about the gun being found. And they also knew, of all people, Don Jr. And so there's a text thread that's public between them all talking about how to get this in the press, how to make this an issue, that I violated, because by that time what had happened is I'd written a book called Beautiful Things. You can still buy it for $19.99 on it. I'm joking. And so I'd written a book, and in the book, it talks about how during that period of time, I admit and talk about my recovery and talk about how I was an addict. And it tells everything about that period of time. It doesn't talk about that specific period of time or that specific day that I bought the gun, but it talks about that. So when they put me on trial, what ended up happening is that literally half the trial was them playing the audio version of my book, in which I wrote for the specific purpose of being as transparent and as radically honest as I could about my addiction. And they used that as the weapon against me to convict me as a violation of 922 G3, which is gobbledygook for anybody, just a bunch of numbers. But what it means is you can't buy a gun if you are, if you consider yourself or can be categorized, how they do that categorization as an addict. Like, am I an addict now? Can I own a gun now? I haven't had a drug or a drink in 7 years. But am I an addict? Well, I consider myself an addict for the rest of my life. So does that mean everybody in recovery should not own a gun? And that's the kind of the ridiculousness of the provision itself. And one of the reasons it's important to talk about is this, is that they never use it as a indictment if that is the only thing that's occurred. The only time 922G3 is used is when you've bought the gun as a straw purchase and you are distributing guns through that way. Or if you bought the gun and then you went out and you robbed a liquor store, or you went home and you shot your domestic partner, or whatever it may be, used in the commission of a crime, or when you are picked up for distribution of drugs and they find that gun on you and they then tack that on. I cannot find a single case in which a standalone has ever been used against anybody that I could find in the the 31 years that the statute existed as that.
Well, that next year, 2019, your dad announces that he's running for president against Donald Trump. Now, at that point, did you agree with him running for president? Or did you feel like, listen, we're done with politics, let's just kind of fade off into the sunset?
No. I very much thought my dad should run for president, and I did not in any way want him to take into consideration the fact that I was a complete and utter mess. And to that end, I continued to lie to him, and I continued to lie to my family about the fact that I was seeking help and that I was in rehabs, and that when really I just had, disappeared and was trying to disappear, and couldn't. It wouldn't let me, and then by a miracle, not a miracle, by an enormous amount of work on my part and a willingness to accept help, I got clean and sober.
Okay, so 2019, your dad is campaigning for president against Trump. And around this time, you go into a computer repair shop in Wilmington, Delaware, and you drop off 3 water-damaged laptops.
No.
No?
That's according to the legally blind laptop repair shop owner whose security cam footage for that day alone was missing and recorded over or unavailable. And so I don't have any memory of going in to drop off a laptop. I do know this. I do know that devices would have been stolen from me over the course of that, 3-year odyssey between 2016 and 2019. I also know this. I know that according to Lev Parnas, in 2018, he and Rudy Giuliani were seeking a quote-unquote hard drive, a laptop of Hunter Biden that was for sale in Ukraine, and specifically being offered by a guy named Dmitry Firtash, who's an oligarch connected to Putin in Austria, who is living as in exile in Austria under indictment by the US government for like 16 different RICO charges. The plane that Lev Parnas was getting on with Igor Fruman before he got arrested was to fly to Austria to pick up the hard drive being offered by Dmitry Firtash before the laptop repair shop was a twinkle in Rudy Giuliani's eye. Now, this laptop repair shop owner, who was legally blind and could not say whether I was the person that dropped it off or not, go watch the videotape of him on the day that the story broke, in which he says he does not know it was me, if it was me or not. He, of all people in the state of Delaware, in Wilmington, Delaware, in which that laptop repair shop is less than 3 miles from my parents' home, where everybody knows my parents live, decides instead of, he can't find me, the person that he thinks that he should turn over my laptop, the laptop never worked, according to him. What he was able to extract from that laptop onto a hard drive, the person he thinks that he should hand it over to is, of all people, Rudy Giuliani, who has admittedly been searching for a laptop in Ukraine and in Austria for almost a year before that, according to Lev Parnas, who worked directly for Rudy Giuliani. So regardless of where the digital information came from, we do know this, is that an enormous amount of my legitimate digital footprint over the course of 20 years of iCloud storage and iPhones and iPads and different devices is obtained and put onto a hard drive and then cobbled together with other digital information of mine from other devices, and it just grows. And it grows from, let's say, I don't know the difference between a gigabyte and a terabyte, but from 1 gigabyte to 20 gigabytes. Too large to fit on any laptop ever to exist. That is what we talk about when people call it a laptop. All of it was stolen. All of it was hacked. None of it was, even if it was just take the laptop repair shop owner at his word. He has no right, even under abandonment in the state of Delaware, to take the personal digital information of a customer, even if it's left at his shop. Think of it this way. You go into an Apple store and you turn in your phone, okay? You turn in your phone to Apple, but you forget to wipe it, okay? A year later, does the customer service agent that took your phone have the right to publish all the pictures on your phone? Does he have the right to sell it? Does he have a right then to take all of those things, put it on a thumb drive, and go out and give speeches and sell the thumb drives for $25 a piece at right-wing conferences around the country? Does he have a right to do that? Does he have a right to take your cell phone and all the information that's on it, Vlad, and then distribute it to every tabloid in the country? Does he have that right? Because that's what happened.
No.
And so everybody sits here and talks about, oh, well, it was a laptop and you left it at a repair shop. So you know what? You don't have a right to privacy. What the fuck are you talking about, man? Seriously, what the fuck is anyone talking about? Can you imagine if I was a woman? Can you imagine if those pictures of me having sex in a motel room, smoking crack, naked, as if I was Ivanka Trump? Now you go, oh, well, she would never do such a thing. Well, I don't know, man. Do you know? I do know this. I do know that she just discovered an island off the coast of Albania and called it hers. But getting back to me, should anyone be subjected to that? Show me your phone. Show me your laptop. All those people in Congress that held up giant blow-up pictures of me having sex naked in Congress, show me your phone. Let me see all your text messages. Let me see every unfiltered thing. Because you know what? You know what an unfiltered life looks like? A digital life? And the reason I know that people, when you actually talk to them about this, understand? No one. Forget about me. It's already happened. It's over. I own it all. I take it all. All those pictures of me naked, all those pictures of me naked with prostitutes, that's me. There's nothing made up that. Now, you know what is made up, though? Is all this bullshit about pedophilia. all this bullshit about children, all that stuff. And you know why I know? And I can say it's bullshit, and everybody can go and test it for themselves. For one reason. It's all there. It's all still online. Not a single fucking media outlet or X or anybody else has thought, you know what this is? It's revenge porn, clearly. It's not by my consent that it's out there. Melania just passed a law, made it a federal crime. But you know what? I open up my X feed now that I'm on X, and you know how many videos there are of me on X having sex? Over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. Now, think if that was anybody else. Would it be okay? Well, you know what? I was a crack addict. So maybe I deserve it, right? Or maybe I deserve it because my dad was president of the United States. Or maybe I deserve it because it all happened in between the time my dad was vice president and president. Or maybe I deserve it because I'm a fucking failed son rich kid that, you know, dad was, that had everything quote unquote handed to him, never had a problem in the world, and fucked up, and so I deserve it. Do I? Well, you can think that, but you know what? If I do, you do. If I do, anybody else does. So show me your phone. Give me your iCloud account.
Look, it was an entirely messed up situation.
No, it was beyond messed up, Vlad. It was beyond messed up.
Yeah.
And the continued question from very smart people about this, without doing the homework of knowing, and I'm not saying you, without doing the homework about what you're saying. You say Hunter Biden, and they say laptop, and everybody goes, oh, and they have, and something happens. There's a chemical reaction. It's corruption. It's greed. It's a failed son. It's, you know, you fill in the blank in between those two things. All I know is this. The laptop never proved a single goddamn thing, except that I was a crack addict. And that when I was smoking crack, I had a lot of sex with consenting adults, all of which have been found and talked to, every single one of them, of which most say I was a really nice guy. And other than that, okay, and I'm not proud of that. I'm not even remotely proud of that. You know what, Vlad, is that I have children. I have adult children. I have a grandchild. And what I've come to accept is that there's no erasing that. I will never be able to run from that. I will never, ever be able to erase the internet. I will never be able to erase people like Garrett Ziegler, who literally has made an entire career out of it. I will never be able to erase people like Clint Lancaster, who has made an entire career out of it. I'll never be able to erase Steve Bannon or Miles Gow, who's serving 30 years in prison for it. I'll never be able to erase any of that. But what I can do is I can say this: I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I'm not. And I'm not going to be. And I'm not going to be shamed by anybody about it. And you know, the thing that I found that's the most incredible piece about it, you know how many people have been hacked? You know how many kids out there? You know how many young adults, not kids, I call them kids, but you know, people draft age, that grew up in a world, in an age in which, you know what, they walked into school and they had that Snapchat, screen save passed around to every one of their classmates. Or the girl that, you know, passed out at a party and a bunch of guys took pictures of her naked and gave them to everybody. Or whatever it may be. It's the realization that in this world, is that privacy is I am the quintessential example of, does not exist. And when someone loses their privacy to the degree that I have, everybody assumes, well, they must deserve it because it eases their guilt for the way in which their voyeurism allows them to participate in what is a crime. What's a crime? And they all say, well, he committed other crimes. He was a criminal. He took money from China. Did I really? I've never taken a single goddamn cent from a foreign nation. Not a single cent from a foreign national entity. Now, I'll tell you what, Jared Kushner took $2.5 billion from Saudis. He took $6 billion from Gulf state nations. And he's representing the United States in a peace talks in a war that nobody wanted. But you're still talking about Hunter Biden's laptop that proves the opposite of that. And let's go back. Did Hunter Biden work for MBNA? Yeah, I worked for MBNA. They're the largest employer in the state of Delaware. You know what? Was I a lobbyist? Yep, I was a lobbyist. Did I serve on the board of a Ukrainian natural gas company? Yes, I did. Did my dad ever profit off the presidency? Not a single legitimate, credible human being in the world has ever found any evidence of that. And they have searched high and low. Not a single one. My dad has never bought a stock or a bond since the entire time. All this talk about the Stock Act, you know, my dad never had to worry about it because in 1972 we became a senator. He made a commitment never to buy a stock or a bond. My dad, when he was a United States senator, was considered and always ranked in the literally the 535th person in terms of assets. Out of 435 members of Congress and 100 United States senators. He was considered the poorest man in Congress for over 40 years. The only asset that he had was a house. The only time my dad ever made money is when he left the vice presidency. He wrote a book and he got a contract. He didn't join boards. He didn't go on some crazy speaking circuit. He didn't start a foundation and raise hundreds of millions of dollars into it and put money in his pocket. He wrote a book. You know what he did with it? He bought my mom the beach house that for 40 years he'd been promising her. And you know what my dad did when he got out of the presidency? He's writing a book. And that's his income. He didn't go on boards. He didn't go and fly overseas. He didn't join the board of Carlyle. He didn't get he didn't get on a plane and go meet the king of Saudi Arabia. He's at home writing a book. He's 84 years old with stage 4 cancer, and he's doing more on a daily basis than Donald Trump does in a week. And we're still talking about Hunter Biden crime family corruption. These guys literally are robbing the place blind. I'll talk to you about anything. You can ask anything you want about me because you know what? You think you know everything. Not you. Generally, people do. And you sit here and you have this notion that because I grew up the son of a United States senator, that I lived in in luxury, that I had this privilege. And I did. I had an enormous amount of privilege. You know what my greatest privilege was? To having that man as my dad. That was my greatest privilege. You know what I'm most ashamed of? I'm not ashamed anymore. But you know what I'm most ashamed of about all my failures? Is that I didn't live up to the person that I wanted to be, to make him proud. Now, my dad's proud of me. I know he's proud of me. But I know this too, is that I got a lot of breaks that other people wouldn't get. I got a lot of things, but I also worked my fucking ass off. I wasn't a crack addict my whole life. And I worked my ass off for the things that I did get. And I fucked it up. I fucked up a marriage. I fucked up a family. I fucked up my sister-in-law's life for a period of time. I fucked up a lot of fucking things. And like I said, addiction can be an excuse, an explanation, but it's never an excuse. And I own it all. But one thing I will not own is people claiming the corruption of my father. Because that never existed. People claiming that I, in some way, was part of some soft corruption that I involved my father in. Total, complete, utter bullshit. And why would I lie at this point, Vlad? Because you know what? You have it all. You have every single document, And by the way, it wasn't just it wasn't just emails. It wasn't just text messages. It was voicemails. They played voicemails that people left for me over years. That's not on a laptop. That doesn't exist. Do you have your voicemails on your laptop? No, it's in an iCloud. They hacked the iCloud and they stole it all. You know what they found? They found my dad calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning in LA saying, honey, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know what to do. I love you. I'll do anything. Please answer the phone. That's the worst thing that they could play as a voicemail that my dad left me, who called me every single day and still does.
Well, there was an email that was found on the laptop or on the hard drive.
Yep.
They called this the smoking gun. So apparently there's an email from a Ukrainian Burisma executive thanking you for the opportunity to meet your father, who was vice president at that time.
Yeah, you know, there's pictures from that day in which my dad walked into a restaurant in Georgetown, which was between the White House and the vice president's residence, in which I was having a board dinner for potential donors for the US-UN World Food Program. And I asked him to stop by. And he came to the dinner, which was in an open restaurant. And he said hello to the people at the table. One of the people at the table was a visiting board secretary for Burisma. And he said, hello, Mr. Vice President. That's it. There's pictures. There's 27 witnesses. Everybody's talked about it. Everybody who was there has been interviewed. That was the extent of the contact. Now, let me ask you a question. Again, we're focused on this. We still are focused on this after, it was, by the way, that was 12 years ago when my dad was vice president of the United States, not president, okay? And Don Jr. opened up a club called the Executive Club, in which he charges $500,000 per member to join a club in which the stated purpose is that you will rub shoulders with the decision makers of the White House, of his father's administration. I'd kid you the fuck not. It's the most expensive private club in the United States of America, except for one. Guess what the other one is? Mar-a-Lago. Are you fucking kidding me? A guy that I was a board secretary that was in Washington, D.C., came to a dinner that I had for the World Food Program, and my dad came and he said hello and said, thank you for the opportunity to meet your father. You know that when I was on the board of Burisma, I was only on the board of Burisma for, I think, less than a 2-year period of time when my dad was vice president, when I knew that I didn't think he was ever going to be back in politics ever again. The rest of the time I was on the board of Burisma, and every single other thing that people are talking about as it relates to my international business, they all occurred when my dad was neither president nor vice president. So all this talk about 10% for the big guy and all this bullshit, by the way, stuff that I never wrote, my dad wasn't even president of the United States. Nobody in my family was in elected office. Zero. If I wanted to offer my dad anything, come be my business partner. Come do this. Come do this together with me, Dad. Let's go out and we'll fly the world and we'll sell, we'll sell gold telephones. We'll print gold Bibles and put our name in them. You know what? You know what we'll do? We'll go into the sneaker business and sell people cheap sneakers from Taiwan. How about steaks? And we'll Biden steaks. That's what we'll do. How about a crypto? They've ruined that for everyone, haven't they? Something I truly believe in, and absolutely, completely bastardized it. And meanwhile, all the time everybody's talking about all of this corruption. My dad wasn't president. He wasn't vice president. No one ever thought that he was going to get back in politics. He was 78 years old. And so you got a problem with that? But meanwhile, my little friend, Eric, the forgotten one, is doing an IPO for an Israeli drone company that he has equity in and merged with one of his defunct Palm Beach businesses for $1.5 billion to sell drones that have been tested on the men, women, and children that they killed in Gaza. But meanwhile, let's talk about when a employee of Burisma was at a dinner and he sent one email saying, "Hunter, it was nice to meet your dad."
Well, they actually created a website that dumped all these images and text messages, Biden Laptop Media. So I got to actually go through some of this. By the way, I'm not mad at your choice of women. I'll just put that out there, you know? I'll say that. The question I had, though, is, you know, I've been a public figure since around, I don't know, 2002 or so when I became DJ Vlad. And having a public presence and so forth made me really think about women that I was with and, you know, taking photos during sex and so forth. From day one, I said, I'm not going to do this because it'll probably get hacked at some point. And since I'm public, it'll spill out there. You being the son of a vice president, senator, and so forth, were you thinking of this as you're taking photos during your various exploits? I know a lot of people do, but being public really puts a lot of extra pressure in these type of situations.
Yeah. You know, if you look at least half those pictures, are they taken by me? Or have they been taken by somebody else? Most of them.
I mean, some of them it's hard. It's hard to say.
By the way, there's a lot of selfies in there. There's a lot. And it's a lot you can't tell.
It's a lot of stuff
there.
But
most of them are taken by me, particularly one that they use over and over and over again with a meth pipe in my mouth when I'm asleep under the covers. There's that one. Remember that one? Number one, I don't smoke meth.
Yeah.
Didn't smoke meth. I was a crack smoker, and that's a meth pipe. Now, people might find that to be strange things for me to fixate on. But as a former crack addict, I take real pride in the fact that I was a crack addict and not a fucking meth head, okay? I don't know. The two worlds do not collide, all right? You would only understand that if you were in the drug world, okay? I was a crack addict. I was a crackhead. I was not a meth head, all right? Number one. But I clearly didn't take that picture, Vlad. A lot of those pictures I clearly didn't take. You know what? I don't know. How did they get those pictures? How did those pictures end up in the hands of the New York Post, the Daily Mail, Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, Miles Gow? By the way, how did it end up in their hands? How did it get to them first? If this was just a leak, if I just got hacked by a anonymous hacker, how did it end up in their hands first? How did it end up that they had that as an October surprise right before an election? You know, one of the things that people really, really conflate and confuse is the 40 or so national security, former national security people that wrote that letter that said this looks like a Russian operation. You know why? Because it looks exactly like a Russian operation. They said they don't know. They didn't say the laptop isn't real. They didn't say the pictures aren't real. But they said that it looks exactly like that. Because you know what Rudy Giuliani did first? He did an exact Putin move. He didn't go and say, this is evidence of corruption, because they had it for over a year and a half. They had all of it. They had hacked all of it. Okay? And you know what they didn't find? They didn't find corruption. So he and Bernie Kerik went to Newcastle County Police, and they stood on the courthouse steps in Delaware, and they said that it had pictures of underage children. Inappropriate pictures of underage children. That's what they said. Nobody said anything about, none of them said any of that. And then what they did is they went up on X with the story, and the story had naked pictures of me in it. And X took it down because it violated their stated rules about revenge porn. Non-consensual naked photos of somebody. And so they took it down. And what ended up happening is everybody said, oh, you said the laptop never existed. Oh, they all lied. They all tried to convince us that it never existed. No one ever tried to convince you of that. Go listen to Steve Bannon literally on tape, Vlad. Go to Mother Jones, November 2020 reporting, in which he has literal tapes of Steve Bannon speaking with Miles Gow, talking about how they fabricated photos, they got the laptop, And they used it, and they were going to use it after the campaign when they were going to claim that they won. And one of the reasons that they're going to claim that they won is this story was suppressed. And then Elon Musk buys X, and he makes it his cause celeb. But I say, laptop, hard drive, iCloud hack, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. I know it exists. It's out there. I can't deny it. I can't deny the legitimate photos or legitimate emails. But I do get, as a human being, to say that it's a complete and utter crime. It's a violation. And that it never proved anything other than that. Is it really bad judgment? Like taking pictures of myself with a prostitute doing crack. Like, who in their right mind? I wasn't in my right mind, Vlad. I was smoking crack every 15 minutes. I was killing myself. It wasn't fun. Now, it may look fun if you haven't been there, but you know what it really was? It was a slow suicide.
Well, as the actual presidential election starts and the debates start between Trump and your father, Trump basically weaponizes you in the process. He was selling Where's Hunter t-shirts during the debate. He said, I don't know Beau, I know Hunter. He said that you didn't have a job until your dad became vice president, that you made a fortune in Ukraine, China, and Moscow. You were given tens of millions of dollars. He referred to you guys as the Biden crime family. He referred to you as crooked Hunter Biden, and he called you a notorious crackhead and grifter.
Yeah.
Now, Trump has targeted people before, but I feel like during this time, you became the main target of Donald Trump.
100%. Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Well, at first, it's really hard to get your footing. You know, you wake up in the morning and you're not just a news story. You are the news, and you're not just a part of the news. You are the entirety of the news. And if you turn on any cable news channel or you open up any paper, the New York Post was writing on average 1.5 stories about me a day for over a year. I appeared on their cover more than any single person in the history of the paper in a year period of time since Alexander Hamilton started the paper. It was coordinated. It was 100% coordinated. Miranda Devine with Steve Bannon, who was working with Miles Gow, who was just convicted of fraud and is sentenced to 30 years yesterday, along with a guy named Alexander Smirnov, who created this whole bribery in Ukraine thing, who was convicted of lying to the FBI for making it up and is serving 6 years prison sentence, and a guy named Gal Luft, who was an Israeli-American that is wanted by Interpol and has been indicted by the United States and the EU for arms dealing, and is a fugitive from justice and believed to be living in Israel right now. Those three people made up the core of everything that came after. And it was all amplified by Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon, who at that same time, by the way, was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, taking videotapes of him and flying on his plane. And so here I am defending myself. Where's Steve? Where the fuck is Steve Bannon? He started GTV with Miles Gow, who committed $1 billion fraud on Chinese expatriates, who blew up the top floor of the Pierre, where he had a condo, in order to blow up all the hard drives that he had that connected him to Steve Bannon and all of the efforts that they've had together. Steve Bannon was arrested on Miles Gow's yacht in the Hamptons. And here we are, and we're talking about what? I don't remember even. What am I defending myself against at this point? I'm not sure. I do know this, is that there's not a single goddamn thing that ever connected my dad to anything, even if you wanted to believe the worst things that you could possibly believe about me. I never took a single dollar from a foreign government, ever, not once. Let alone involve my dad in any business that I had. Ever, not once. And every single piece of evidence that anyone could ever ask for, even if you had subpoena power, exists on the internet for you to go look at right now.
Well, the presidential election happens and your dad wins. And I've said this on record multiple times. I voted for your dad. I remember the morning of the election when we're...
Can I say this on the record? You'd have to be a fucking idiot not to vote for my dad in 2020 after what Donald Trump did in terms of COVID. I mean, look, we all sitting here and trying to, I'm supposed to play nice, right? Because my dad used to be the president of the United States, or that I may be biased against Donald Trump. Does everybody remember COVID? Does everybody remember him telling you that you should drink bleach? Does everybody remember him saying, you can wear a mask, don't wear a mask, maybe wear a mask, I don't know? Does everybody remember Bob Woodward's reporting that he literally hid the truth from the American people because he didn't want to lose an election? Does everybody remember that he drove unemployment up to over 16%, the highest in the world of first world economies? Does everybody remember that he created the largest spike in inflation in the history of the United States? Does everybody remember that? Well, they're going to remember it real quick. You know why? Because he wasn't going to start a war in Iran. Remember? That's what he ran on. He promised us that Kamala Harris was going to start a war with Iran if she was a nutball and she would start a war with Iran. Remember that? Well, here we are. You know how many times he stopped this war? You know why he should receive the Nobel Peace Prize? Because he has delivered peace in Iran at least 40 times in the last 36 days. At least 40 times. I think if anybody gets the Nobel Peace Prize, it should be for delivering peace to the world 40 times in the same war. It's amazing. He's incredible. He's an incredible negotiator. You know what he did? He bombed Iran. He told us that he took out their nuclear weapons. Remember that? Remember when he said, absolutely, they demolished it. They dropped these bombs. They're gone. They'll never have a nuclear program again. And everybody said, that's not possible. But he said, fake news. And then he comes along and he decides, you know what? He's going to go in and he's going to drop some more bombs. But the first bomb he's going to drop, you know where he's going to drop it? He's going to drop it on a girls' school in Iran, in Tehran, and kill 168 school children with the 2 Tomahawk missiles. Not a single tap, a double tap. And you know what he's going to do after that? He's going to lie to us all. And he's going to say, that came from somebody else, didn't come from us. You know the only country in the world that flies Tomahawk missiles? United States.
U.S.
What the fuck are we doing, people? And then he drops the bombs with zero plan for Iran to respond exactly as they have. Every single expert in the world. The Israeli prime minister, since the time of Jimmy Carter, has gone into the Oval Office and requested the bombing of Iran. And every single president since Jimmy Carter has said no. Even probably when Iran deserved it a number of times. They said no. You know why they said no? Because they could shut down commerce for the entire world by closing the Straits of Hormuz. Everybody. I knew that. And I'm not an Iran expert. Everybody knows that. You know what? You know, clearly wasn't the only person who obviously didn't know that other than Pete Hegseth? You know, our esteemed former weekend anchor of Fox News, who's now the Department of Defense. You know the only other person who clearly didn't understand that?
Trump.
Donald Trump. You know the only country right now that's benefiting from this war? Not even Israel. It's Russia. Russia's the only country in the war. They were done. They were cooked. $40 a barrel. They could no longer sustain the cost of what was happening in Ukraine. They could no longer sustain it. You know enough about Ukraine to know that. They could not sustain it for another 2 years at $40 a barrel. You know what it's at now? It went up to 120, then it floated back down to about 80, then it went up to 90, and then it's back down to like 68. Now it's up to 75 today. Because you know what? He said the war was over, then he dropped 4 more bombs today, and Iran just, blew up a oil tanker in the Straits of Hormuz that's supposedly open that we have control over. So when you say you voted for my dad, I don't know if it was the right thing to do. I promise you, Vlad, it was the right thing to do. I'm absolutely certain. You know how I got that evidence? I got that evidence because we're living under a dictatorship right now in the form of it's less Adolf Hitler because he's not as concentrated as that. It's more Idi Amin. It's buffoonery, incompetence, complete and utter incompetence on top of a giant grift of the likes no one in the world has ever seen, ever. But let's get back to the board position I took 12 years ago. Let's talk about that. Or wait, maybe the job I took out of law school in 1996.
Well, leading up to your dad winning the presidency, after the whole laptop situation happened, that's when you actually went sober. I think June of 2019. You've actually been sober since then, right?
I got sober in June of 2019, and I have been sober for over 7 years now.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Congratulations. And that laptop, I assume, was the final straw for you, where it's like, okay, look, I can't keep making excuses.
Yeah.
So, your dad wins the presidency. But of course, Donald Trump does not accept the win, says that there was, some sort of tampering with the polls and so forth. And
wait,
that
let's just
leads
stop
up
there.
to
Let's just stop there because I think it's really important from a journalistic perspective, okay? There's this thing about balance that people do in the media and in journalism, and I consider you a journalist. This is balance. It's like, well, this is what he said. Let's just be clear. What he said is batshit fucking crazy that has zero fucking evidence ever, even a scintilla, not even a little bit, of which Fox News had to pay $787 billion, or whatever the hell it is, $1 million, for lying about it on his behalf. So Donald Trump starts an attempt to overthrow the democratically elected presidential winner in 2020.
Right. There was no proof whatsoever that there was any tampering. In fact, it was the most closely watched election in human history.
Yep, and my dad got more votes than anybody that's ever run for president of the United States. Got 11 million more votes than Barack Obama, 9 million more votes than anybody. 81 million votes.
Yeah, one of those votes was mine. So this whole happens, it was a Stop the Steal rally, and a group of Trump supporters ended up taking over the Capitol building in order to stop the actual election process. Ultimately, they were, put down and so forth. There was multiple deaths. I still am very upset that the family of that one woman who died trying to break in, was it Ashley something?
Babbitt.
Ashley Babbitt, the fact that she actually, her family managed to sue and get some money out of the government when clearly she was acting like a crazy maniac trying to break in and stop the election process. If I was a cop, I would have shot her also. But ultimately, that did not stop the election process, and your dad becomes the president of the United States. Now, you had your dad for 8 years as vice president. What changed in your life when he's now president?
Everything. What I mean by everything is that the chance of ever kind of returning to any type of normalcy or being able to privately heal my family, heal myself, build rebuild a life, and just all completely 100% disintegrates. So between the time that my dad is elected and the time in which he's sworn in is that time in which Donald Trump is grasping at straws of ways to stay in power. And part of the obsession that he has is with me, because he thinks that I'm the Achilles heel to my father. My father's lost 2 children already. He just lost my older brother and my best friend and the entire my best friend and his 2. And what he thinks, Donald Trump is like an animal, and I really mean this, is that he can sniff out weakness, or what he perceives to be weakness. And what would be the weakest, what would obviously be the weakest chink in the armor? It would be me.
You.
Not because I'm inherently weak, but because what would be the thing that would distract and diminish and probably destroy my dad more than anything? Is if I relapse, is if I'm gone, if I finish the job that I tried to start, 3 years before. And so he goes to Bill Barr in the interim in December, in early December, and he demands that Barr announce an investigation into me. Now, they had already been investigating me, and Barr and his Justice Department couldn't find a charge to bring against me. But he asked Barr to announce 2 things. He asked him to announce an investigation into me, and he asked him to announce an investigation into election fraud. Barr says no to one and acquiesces and gives him the investigation into me, and then resigns from office in December. And that's what I'm left with. I'm left with that detritus for the next 4 years of an ongoing investigation by the only remaining Republican U.S. attorney in the country. Every other U.S. attorney, when an administration turns over, hires all their own U.S. attorneys. My dad decides in his administration that in light of fairness, of the idea that the Justice Department and the people that work for the Justice Department have incredible integrity, he's going to leave the Republican-appointed U.S. attorney, Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in place to do the investigation into me, which was a big fucking mistake. Yeah.
Right. So they start an investigation about the gun case and also some tax issues that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Along that time, though.
By the way, they don't start. They don't. Sorry. Just to clarify, and it doesn't matter. But they don't start the gun case. They don't even bring up the gun case until they don't bring up the gun case until a month before my plea agreement, because it breaks his news. They never investigated the gun case. They never went through any investigation. The gun incident. The gun was lost and found and was in the possession. Nobody ever talked about it again until. This right-wing blog raised it, and a month before I got my plea agreement in the tax case, they raised the issue of this gun. My lawyers never even talked to me about it for 3 years, that between 21 and 23.
Well, while your dad is still in office in 2023, they find a dime-sized bag of cocaine in one of the cubbies outside the Situation Room. And of course, everyone points the finger at you for leaving the cocaine there because of your past. But you guys weren't even there. You guys were at Camp David?
Yeah, we were at Camp David. That's the other thing, is that I over the course of 4 years, probably spent 40 nights in the White House, because it was really, really, really difficult place for me to be. It just is number one, it's an incredible fishbowl. But somebody told me that I really have to explain this, because people don't understand it. And people really think that I was, that I brought cocaine into the White House. Number one, I was being drug tested for most of that time by the Federal Bureau of Probation. So I can attest at least to the period of time from my indictment on, when I was under probation and supervised release. in which I had a probation officer that came to my house at least 2 to 3 times a week and drug tested me for almost a 2.5-year period of time, okay? But beyond that, which was during that period of time when this cocaine was found in the White House. If you look at a model of the White House, okay? The residence is in the middle on the 3rd floor, okay? I have 2 Secret Service agents, 4 Secret Service agents, 1 in the lead car and 2 in the car that I'm in. So 4 total that follow me everywhere for 4 years, okay? When I come to the White House, when I would come to the White House, you pull up to the entrance of the South Lawn where you had a cage match, and there's that entrance there. It's called the diplomatic room. And you go from there straight to the elevator directly behind you and a little bit to the left up to the 3rd floor to the residence, okay? That's how family enters the White House. Over here is the West Wing, and it's where the Oval Office is. And you have that portico, Rose Garden, and then you have the Oval Office. On that side of the White House, by the West Wing, there's an entrance to the West Wing that goes below the Oval Office. There's a guard stand as soon as you come in, okay? And before you get to the guard stand, you can take a right. You go down that hallway. At the end of the hallway, there's a set of cubbies. And in those cubbies is where you put your phone if you have top secret security clearance and are entering the Situation Room. In what fucking world am I going in to the Situation Room and taking a bag of Coke and putting it in the cubby and leaving it? I've never been in the Situation Room. I don't have a national security clearance. I don't have top secret clearance. And if I did, I would never have left my goddamn Coke there. Just literally. The lack of logical thinking that goes into this. So they find it, by the way, when I'm not even there. Not even there. And half the world believes that I left cocaine in a cubby outside the Situation Room. Now come up with a scenario that finds me with a bag of cocaine, putting it into a cubby meant for the electronic devices of people with top secret national security clearance that are there to advise the president in the Situation Room, which is meant for classified briefings on covert operations and war. What am I doing there?
Yeah, I believe you. I don't think that was your Coke.
Well, thanks, Vlad. I'm glad I could convince you of that. I mean, it's like, I can't believe I got to go through this shit. But I get it, okay? Because here's the other thing that I also realize. You know what? If I leave this room right here, okay, and somebody finds Coke tomorrow in it, you know who's it's going to belong to?
You.
Of course it is. If I get in a car
Right.
and I'm driving on PCH and a cop pulls me over, and you know what? He don't like the look of me, and he knows who I am, and he thinks I'm a piece of shit, and he finds something underneath the seat of my car. Who's going to believe me? You? They think that I left a dime bag of cocaine or however much it was in a cubby outside the Situation Room meant for electronic devices underneath the Oval Office. If they can believe that, you know, they keep showing this video of me on 4th of July. It's 102 degrees out. And I'm going like this because I'm literally sweating my ass off on the portico, the porch, watching the fireworks with my whole family. And Bowie's about 4 years old at the time, and he's running around, and I'm trying to lift him up, and he's trying to get to his sister, and my mom's telling me to come over here, and I'm turning this way, and I turn that way, and they take this thing and they slow it down. And you know what? That's evidence that I was using cocaine. Because I'm literally like this. I'm going like this.
Yeah.
Who would believe me? You know what? So be it. So be it. all I can do is, you know what? Live my life. I got nothing to hide, man. And the one thing that I wouldn't hide is this, is if I relapse, I guarantee you're going to fucking know it.
Well, in 2024, during the final year of your dad's term, you get convicted on 3 felony counts for lying on a federal firearms application and illegally possessing a gun while using narcotics. And then you plead guilty to 9 federal tax charges.
Yeah.
Now, we fast forward a little bit. While your dad is running for president, he ultimately withdraws from the presidential race.
Yeah.
Now, George Clooney was one of the people that actually urged him to drop out. And you responded. You said, fuck him and everyone around him. George Clooney's not a fucking actor. I don't know what he is. He's a brand. I'll be honest.
You're really getting your money's worth, Vlad. You're going to get your George Clooney cut. Here's my George Clooney statement. Is that it was incredibly unfair of me to say that George Clooney's not an actor. He's an incredible actor, and he's an incredible human being. And he is not only a good person, every single one of the people that I know that is friends with George Clooney, that happen to be friends of mine, say he's an incredibly generous, decent, smart, committed person that has done great things for a lot of people. And you know what? I still fucking hate him. And he can go fuck himself for being mean to my dad. So, sue me. All of those things can be true. I cannot like him because I think that what he did was unfair and unproductive and disloyal. You know what? But I can believe that as a son. It doesn't mean that I think that George Clooney's a bad person. I think he made a bad decision. And I can be mad at him. And you know what? I think that's fair. I think it's absolutely fair. And by the way, I actually really liked his last film. And I like most of his films. And he's an incredible actor. And I don't know. I am, and I still am really, really, really angry at him at the way that he handled what he did.
Well, look, I voted for your dad when he ran against Trump. And ultimately, I voted for Kamala when she ran against Trump. I've been a Democrat really my whole life. I mean, there's pictures of me at the polling booth with my kids, voting for Kamala. You can see the piece of paper and everything.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I was one of the voices that during the actual election, I said, I don't think that your dad should run. I feel that during the debate, in terms of his overall cognitive ability, I think it's going to be too much to actually win against Trump. So I was one of those voices that actually agreed with Clooney. I'm not going to sit here and, talk to you and lie about it. Listen, ultimately, Kamala had a horrible race and she won, she lost, even though I voted for her. But at that moment, I actually agreed with Clooney. I felt that once I saw the debate and it seemed like he wasn't really keeping up with Trump the way that he should be.
Yeah.
That was my opinion.
So he took your advice.
Right.
He took Clooney's advice. 30 days later, less than 30 days later, he withdrew from the race. Right? Mm-hmm. I think that was a courageous act. I don't think there's ever been a president of the United States who's done something to be able to give up political power without it being torn away from him or losing an election. I know there isn't. I know there isn't anybody that ever has done something totally against their legacy and the interest, their personal interest, personal political interest, on behalf of what he thought would be the greater good in the Democratic Party at the time. Now, I can tell you this, is that none of us knew at that time that he would be diagnosed with stage 4 cancer that they didn't catch, that he has metastatic bone cancer that they didn't catch, that he had stage 4 prostate cancer that they didn't know about. None of us. None of us. He had a horrible debate. Do I think as a son that my dad can hang the moon? Yeah. I think my dad can do anything. And I'll go and I'll sit there and I'll say, look at his legislative record, greater legislative record than any president since Lyndon B. Johnson. Look at his, look at the midterms. He had a better midterms than any president, incumbent president since FDR. I'll say, look at all the things he's done. And you know what I also know is that my dad, when he gets knocked down, never gives up. He always gets up. He always defies expectations. So from my perspective, everybody sat around and said that I was some Machiavelli sitting in the White House saying, no, you got to keep running. You got to keep doing it. What a bunch of bullshit, Vlad. You know what I wanted? I wanted him back. I wanted him out. I told him as much. I said, Dad, I know it's the hardest thing in the world, but I want you. I want my dad back. First time in my life in which a job that he's had, and he had really important jobs, ever took him away from us. It wasn't what he was still more present than 90% of parents that I know, but he took him away from me. And so when that happened and those calls came in, George Clooney thinks that I was out there and Pod Save America guys and Jake fucking Tapper all saying that I was inside the White House and I was telling my dad he's got to keep fighting and stay in and everybody's propping him up. You know what I was saying to him? I was saying, Dad, I promise you it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. They're going to make it impossible on you, Dad. You have the nomination. You can go all the way. I think you could still win, Dad. I do. I do. I think you can walk on fucking water. I still do. And instead, I did the hardest thing in my life. I actually was thinking about me more than I was thinking about him when I said that. Because I wanted it to be over. They're fucking so cruel, Vlad. I've had to move 5 times. I am in more debt than I think that anyone can ever be expected to come out of or ask anybody to forgive. I am I have been the subject of more total and complete public humiliation than anyone, and this is not me like going, wow, look at me, than anyone that I could possibly think of. And you know what my response to it is? Here's all of me. I got one single thing that I can do. I can talk to people that are still sick and suffering and say, hey, fuck, if I can make it through that shit and stay sober, call me, sign up, come to me. I don't care how it's through. Join. And so that period of time when George Clooney did that, yeah, I was fucking mad. You know why? Because I really, 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 really like George Clooney. And it upset me. I didn't know him from Adam, but I look at him from afar. I look at what he's done in life. I look at the friends that he has. I look at the people that tell the stories about his generosity, and it really made me mad. It made me mad because you know what he could have done? He could have picked up the phone and called me, and I would have told him. I would have said, George, just give him time. You don't move an aircraft carrier on a dime. Give him a minute. Give him a minute. Instead of, without telling anyone, going to the New York fucking Times and writing an op-ed, an open letter. That's all I ask. I think that's fair for me to be mad at George Clooney. That being said, Jake Tapper's a fucking asshole, period.
Well, leading up to this, like I mentioned before, you were convicted of 3 counts for the gun, and you pled guilty to 9 counts of tax evasion. Yeah. Well, tax charges. I'm not sure about evasion.
No. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
But ultimately, before your dad left office on December 1st, 2024, he pardoned you of all the offenses.
Yeah.
And he said that the decision was there because he felt that you were being charged unfairly based on other U.S. citizens. And he felt that Trump was weaponizing these charges.
Yeah.
Did you know that this pardon was coming?
48 hours before it was signed, or 36 hours before it was signed.
Did you expect your dad to do that?
No. Well, let me put it this way.
When you found out?
Is that when my dad said that he wouldn't pardon me, he meant it. I knew it. I knew he meant it. Is that my dad was certain that he was going to win the election. And if he was president of the United States, he wasn't going to pardon me. And the reason he was going to pardon me is because he would have a Department of Justice and a Department of Corrections and a Department of Probation and a federal judiciary that would treat me fairly. So, for instance, on the gun case, the 922 G3 was just overturned by the Supreme Court. I have a legitimate grounds for appeal for that and would probably win on that appeal. That would be overturned. As it relates to the tax case, I paid all my taxes in full 3 years before I was charged with penalties and interest. I went to the IRS before they ever came to me or charged me, and I paid them penalties and interest. I don't know any similarly situated person as it relates to their taxes that has been charged with a federal crime after having paid their taxes with penalties and interest. But they came after me. And remember, they didn't come after me. After 2.5 years, they gave me a plea deal. And then they waited to sentence me for 6 months. And in that, 6 weeks. And in that period of time, what happened? Donald Trump got charged with like 34 felonies. And so the right went crazy. They went nuts. And a plea deal, this never happens, Vlad. The judge was handed 4 amicus briefs that usually are only things that go to the Supreme Court on behalf of third parties who have no interest in the case. The Heritage Foundation and about 6 other groups came forward and said that I was getting a sweetheart deal. The prosecutor on the case, the U.S. attorney, the assistant U.S. attorney, had to go into hiding. She still doesn't work at it. She was given lifelong protection because her life was threatened over and over again. She left the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware after 22 years because of it. Didn't show up at the plea agreement. So when the judge had an out, she took it and went to trial. Went to trial for things that I should have never gone to trial for. I think in a fair Department of Justice, with a fair Department of Corrections, with a fair Department of Probation, not under the thumb of Donald Trump, I know my dad would not have pardoned me. I know he wouldn't have pardoned me. But he pardoned me, and he pardoned me about 3 days after Donald Trump appointed Matt Gaetz. Remember, it was Matt Gaetz was going to be the first guy to become the Attorney General. And he looked at that, and then he saw that he appointed Kash Patel as FBI director. And he thought, wait a second, should I believe Donald Trump when he says that he's going to go after, with the Department of Justice, with his Department of Justice, all of his enemies? Should I believe him and leave my son to that fate? Would you?
No, I think most dads would pardon their kids on their way out of office. I think that's a very normal thing.
However,
I mean, if you look at all the Trump pardons, I mean, he's pardoned rappers and so forth. So, I mean, the fact that
pardon rappers,
your dad pardoned his own son is not a surprise.
He's pardoned people that are paying his family. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
Paying for their business deals, paying for that. I mean, like, it's not a secret. Go listen to Liz Oyer at the thing. Now, everybody goes, yeah, well, this is a real shot to Joe Biden's legacy and this, that, and the other thing. You know what? Yeah, I get it. In a world in which you talk about everything as if it's balanced, there's two truths to this. In what world does my dad not pardon me? I don't know. I don't know. Just for 1 second, be objective about it. Not you, but the rest of the world. Just be objective about it. And what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to apologize for it the rest of life? You know what I am? I'm incredibly goddamn grateful my dad pardoned me, because I have no faith that these guys would not have violated my parole 6 times to Sunday. Every day.
When you say that you're millions in debt right now, what is the debt from?
From legal fees. From having to defend myself against a impeachment hearing, a congressional investigation, a Department of Justice investigation, a Maine Department of Justice investigation, 3 different U.S. attorneys, the Oversight Committee in the House, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, the House Ways and Means Committee, and 4 years of being represented in a federal DOJ investigation on 12 different felony counts and 2 trials.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, by the way,
I've paid
you know
over
what,
$1 million in
Vlad,
legal fees.
I don't think everybody understands this too. Do you know what I did for the 4 years that my dad was president of the United States in terms of business? Nothing. I painted. I literally painted because it was the only way that I saved my life, through painting. And one day I met a gallerist and he said, "Do you want to show him my gallery?" I said, "Yeah, I absolutely do. You think you can sell some of these?" And he said, "Absolutely." And we came up with a deal in which he would only sell to anonymous buyers, except 3 of my friends bought paintings. I sold, quote unquote, $1.5 million of paintings over 4 years. Bullshit. What I sold was, at 30% of that, I made I'll give you my tax returns. I made average $12,000 a year over 4 years. I borrowed the rest of the money. I paid child support. I paid $240,000 a year in child support, and they call me a deadbeat dad of a woman that's being represented by Donald Trump's lawyer, Clint Lancaster.
Wow, okay.
$240,000 a year, and they call me deadbeat dad. I pay almost double the amount of the statutory maximum now. I've given Navy over 60 paintings, and they call me a deadbeat dad. And she goes and sells her story to 60 Minutes Australia, and she writes a book, and she does all of the things that she does. And all of these things, Vlad, and I sit and I say, okay, well, here's the deal. You know everything about me. Tell me about yourself. And you know what happens? Is that I got 3-time Trump voters that come to me and say, forget about the fucking politics. Let's talk. I got Candace Owens that'll sit down with me, and I think half the shit Candace says is fucking crazy. But you know what? She's real. And we have a discussion about humanity. I'm going to go on anybody's show they'll have me. Sean Ryan's a friend of mine now. You know what? You know the shit that he said about my dad? If I'm willing to forgive him, if I'm willing to forgive Candace, if I'm willing to forgive Tucker, if I'm going to people that literally haunted me for 4 years, I say to the rest of the world, forget about me, people. I'm the shiny distraction that was created whole cloth by Donald Trump. He still has you focusing on my dad, who's 84 with stage 4 cancer, who's getting up every day at 6 o'clock and going to work out and writing a book and making speeches. You know what he's not doing? He's not selling gold sneakers and Bibles. I want to use the platform that they give me for something, Vlad. This one thing I got, they built this platform, they set me on top of it and lit me on fire, and you know what? At the end of the day, I'm still here, man. I got a lot to say. You know what I got a lot to say about? I got a lot to say about the people that are fucking forgotten and left behind. And that's not because you're a Republican or a Democrat. You know what? People are goddamn pissed off. You know why they're pissed off? It's real easy, Vlad. We have the largest disparity in wealth in the history of the world right now. Wow. Wonder why people are angry. That they can't pay for health care. That they can't pay for groceries. That they can't put gas in their car to make it to work. That they got to work 3 jobs. That they have no child care. that it looks like the college education that they worked their whole lives to get to is going to be worthless because of AI. That nobody's telling them what's going to come with AI. That none of the AI companies seem to realize that every single piece of the content of the things that they're building are stolen from the world. The entire history of our human history, our cells, our genetics, everything. And someone's not standing up and saying, that's ours. That belongs to me, not you, not a company, not Elon Musk, not Anthropic, not ChatGPT. It belongs to us. Every one of those love letters, every one of those movies, every one of those books, they were written by us, not you. Why do you get them? Why do you get them and then decide what you're going to do without telling any of us what that is? Why don't we own that? They're pissed off. And you know what everyone on the Trump team wants you to do? They want you to be pissed off at Hunter Biden for being a crack addict and spending time in a motel room with some really nice prostitutes that were very kind to me. That's it. So you go ahead. You know what? Here's what I got to say to all of them. Is it, you know what? You want to believe it was my Coke? Fucking fine. I don't give a shit. You want to believe that the laptop says everything? I don't give a shit. Fine. What do we do next? Okay? I'll take it all. You believe it anyway. Okay? So what do we do next? How are we going to fix this shit? Because we're at war with Iran. That's been ended 40 times now. He just made 1.6. He took something that I love. I was orange-pilled by a book called The Internet of Money. I truly believe in Bitcoin. I truly believe in the idea of cryptocurrency. You know why I truly believe in it? It's because when I worked at the chairman of the board of the World Food Program, the U.S. division of it, I traveled around the world to all the places in which there were refugee camps. And what we were trying to do at that time is we were trying to institute a plan by which people would have the ability to transact on microtransactions through a digital asset, by digitally, so that they wouldn't drain the entire economy. And I read The Internet of Money and I thought, you know what? That is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about subsistence farmers in Angola being able to sell their crops in Kinshasa over a digital phone because they get real-time information and currency. Being able to talk about an itinerant farmer in the Salinas Valley being able to send money home to Mexico City without having to pay 12% to Western Union. Or for a Ukrainian immigrant to be able to send money back to their parents from Los Angeles to Kyiv without having to go through SWIFT and open up a bank account and have their mother have a bank account. So how do they have to do it? Before what? You got to put cash in your pockets and try to fly home and hope that the DEA doesn't pick you up along the way? So what solves that? The blockchain solves that. And what have they done? They took this and they totally turned it into a fucking grift. Bitcoin's down from 120 to 60 to below 60. He was the Bitcoin Messiah. He was the cryptocurrency Messiah. You know what he did? He took it all and he did like he does everything. He dirtied it. He muddied it. He made it dirty. And you know how we know? It's literally, it's in fucking black and white. He launched a coin, and I believe in fucking tokens. He launched a coin and he extracted, he took 80% of the inside and he extracted, what, $650 or $1 million from the token alone? That's dropped in value from 75 to $1.36? And Melania did it, and Barron did something, and then the boys over here did something, and they took money from the UAE and from the Saudis, and they took $500 million here and $500 million here, and all of a sudden they got a new jet. The Qataris gave them, and they put $1 billion of U.S. taxpayer money, and they get to keep it when they leave. And we're sitting here wondering, and Hunter Biden has to explain for the 4,000th fucking time how he just wasn't at the fucking White House that night. And he didn't leave his, his bag of Coke in a cubby outside the Situation Room. It is all a distraction. It's all a distraction. You want to believe that I am a privileged guy that took advantage of and used my influence? Believe it, man. But I got a stage now. They gave it to me. So I want you to train your eyes. Believe everything you want to believe about me. Train your eyes on what's happening in front of you. Train it on what's happening in front of you.
Well, last question. You've recently come back to social media. You are now on Twitter, and you sometimes tweet more than 100 messages a day.
Oh, well, that's not true. Is it literally, it's like, thank you. Like for the first period of time is what I did is that I got such an incredible outpouring response from one of the posts that I put up, and it was all about recovery. And these people calling that were replying back, and I'm new to X, and I didn't know that you don't necessarily do this, but literally people telling me that about how their brother just had overdosed 3 years ago, and thank you for the message. And just these incredible 3-time Trump voters saying, you know, I voted for Trump 3 times, but I really love what you're saying, and keep doing it, and congratulations on being sober. And so I said, you know, I literally thought it appropriate to say thank you to the people that actually took the time to write things that aren't easy to write, no matter if it's anonymously or not. And then some of them, I took a lot of time to respond in full, like really what I thought. And I didn't realize that you're not supposed to do that either. But you know what? Who the fuck cares? Is that, you know, I have no other choice but to be me. All of it. 100% of it.
Well, one of the things that's come out during this time was you potentially running for president in 2028. Is that a real thing, or are you just trolling?
I never ever would troll about that. I came on Vlad TV to announce my candidacy for. I told somebody, Vlad, if I announce for president, then then I do want somebody to drug test me. Okay, the politics is debate to come and talk about shit that really matters, and the shit that really matters is opening our eyes to actually what is happening in this country. But even more than that, is that there's one thing that connects us all, and it's the struggle. Everybody struggles. Everybody's lost a brother. Everybody's lost a parent. Everybody's dealing with cancer. Everybody is dealing with addiction. Everybody has a hunter in their life that has fallen down and is fighting like hell to get back up. Connects us all. I don't care if you're worth $1 billion. I don't care if you're worth nothing. I don't care if you're black or you're white, Hispanic. Connects us all. Let's start there. Forget about all the politics. Forget about the shit you said about my dad. I'll forget about the shit that I said about yours. Let's just start there. Because this idea that we are all so disconnected, that we are all so at each other's throats, that they're so divided, that we don't believe this, that, and the other thing. I saw you talking to DL, oh God, I love him, Hewley, talking about him and Snoop Dogg, and a break of a 25-year, like a love affair. I mean, in the best way. I mean, like, he loves Snoop.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, now a 7-year resident of LA, like, I love Snoop.
Me and Snoop had the worst argument.
Really?
We argued.
Over Trump?
When after this thing happened, he'll tell you, we talked for 2 hours shouting at each other.
Huh.
Snoop, I loved him so much. I grew up in LA on 135th and Avalon. And when he got in trouble, I prayed for a crib. Nigga, do you know what it's like to pray for? I prayed.
Prayed for a crib.
I prayed that he would be all right.
And politics is that we're now told that we got to choose. And one thing I do say is this, is that I don't want to live in that country anymore, because that's not my country. It's not. Everything's not a zero-sum game. Thanksgiving shouldn't be a blood sport. Shouldn't. You know, Uncle Ray can vote for whoever the fuck he wants and still have fun and, you know, play lawn darts on 4th of July. You know, I mean, seriously, What the fuck? We've never been perfect. Never been perfect. Shit. I've fucking campaigned like a madman against George Bush. You know what? I'll take George Bush 1,000 times. Please, please, Republicans, bring back Mitt Romney. Please. I would vote for him tomorrow. Just makes you realize, like, what's the one thing? Like, you know, remember those things when we were kids? You know, like, what's the one thing that's different from the others? You know, they used to play it on, like, Sesame Street and stuff like that. Like, what's the one thing in the past 250 years that stands out a little bit? Maybe it's the guy that paved over the Rose Garden and just put a fucking Nazi eagle on the front of the fucking White House. Maybe. Maybe it's that guy. Maybe it's the guy who just took a fucking jet from the Qataris, the largest gift ever given to a president, by a factor of 1,000, which is completely illegal. Completely. Maybe which one of these things is different from the other? And then think about how you feel. Think about how you feel about your neighbor. Think about how you feel about your future. Think about how you feel about the way in which your children's lives is going to progress in this country. Think about it. And think, which one of these things is different from the other? I didn't feel this way when Barack Obama was president. I didn't feel this way when George Bush was president. And we were in a 20-year-long protracted war. I didn't feel this way when I was 14 years old and Ronald Reagan was president. I don't know anybody. Go back. Maybe Andrew Johnson? Maybe. I don't know. Post-Civil War?
So if Donald Trump sat down next to you right now, what would you tell him?
Okay, this is a question. I would tell him to go fuck his fucking self. That's what I would tell him. And please leave. I mean, like I can be civil and I can tell you, like, oh, well, listen, he's a president. I don't want him to be pissed off. I mean, he's the president of the United States. Well, obviously, wouldn't you want to have a constructive? Fuck that. This man has tried to torture me for fucking 10 years. He says the shit that he says about my dad, his obsession with tormenting my dad, hanging a picture of an auto pen on the colonnade, demeaning him, and all the things that he said about him. And anyone would expect me to do anything outside of which I would never do is physical violence against that person? Well, what the fuck kind of man would I be if I didn't tell him to go fuck himself? What kind of man would I be? And I ask that to all of you UFC fans. I'm a UFC fan too. You know, I've challenged Don Jr. to a fucking cage match 3 times now. Never heard back from him. That's how I'm going to pay all my debt.
The cage match?
Yeah. I got to do something.
I'll pay to see that.
See, right? That's what I keep thinking about. I got to get in fucking shape though, man. I keep saying this. I'm 56 years old. I don't know.
Well, Hunter Biden, man, a fascinating conversation. And I can tell you one thing, as someone that's been on the internet ever since there's been an internet, the one superpower that you have on the internet, and this goes for everyone, you, me, everyone included, is transparency. I think that people really get into problems on social media because they try to hide things. They try to cover things up. They don't want to talk about things. They let other people tell the story for them. You have been completely transparent. All warts and scars and all, there's really nothing that's been off the record in this conversation. And I think by you putting it all out there, people lose the ability to weaponize things against you. What can someone say about you that you haven't already said about yourself? And I think people really respect that. And I think, for example, when you look at how Kamala ran, that was the one thing that made her lose, in my opinion, was that she was too guarded. She didn't do real interviews. You had no idea who she really was. And that's where Trump won in that regard. He was able to sit there and blab away with anyone that, sat down with him. And I think by you putting everything out there and you being transparent and being honest and telling your truth, I think you're going to have a lot of support. And, if you ever do want to run for office in the future, I think you could have a real chance at winning.
I'll only do it if you'll beat my vice president, Vlad.
Let's do it.
All right, brother.
Well, I wasn't born in this country. Can I actually? No, I can't. Because if you were to die, then if I wasn't born in this country, I'd become president.
Shit, I'm not going to die. Don't say that. All right. All right, man. I appreciate it, buddy.
That's what it is, man. I appreciate it too.
Okay.
Wish you and your family all the best.
Thanks, brother. See you. Take it easy.
Peace.